And no, we're not just referring to that scene with the apes and the bones from 2001: A Space Odyssey, which is a riff on Homer's The Odyssey. Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol, William Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, Jane Austen's Emma, and Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's Sherlock Holmes, and basically every musical ever, are examples of the many stories that gave birth to fan fiction adaptations written, shared, and rewritten throughout human civilization. In America, writers like Langston Hughes and Zora Neale Hurston re-established a place for Black voices and stories within the dominant white and European spaces of early 20th century America. Houston's entire oeuvre can be understood as a synthesis and rebirth of African American folklore and tales, i.e., myths. Sometimes the fanfic even stars an adorable terrier. What's the story, Wishbone? Anyone remember what's the story, Wishbone? Okay, all right, we got one. I loved that little Jack Russell Terrier and his adventures. What all of these stories have in common is that they asked the question, what if? What if Sherlock and John were a definitely, but not canonically, gay couple in modern London? What if a bunch of stories featured a Jack Russell Terrier protagonist? And the answer, my friends, is that they would be better. Or, at the very least, more diverse in their scope, vision, and reach. Fan fiction asks the question, what if, and then answers with varying degrees of success. When we talk about therapeutic fan fiction, we are talking about doing the very same thing with our own lives. What if I changed careers? What if I dated this person instead? Or what if I loved myself authentically, exactly as I am? What would that story look like? And it helps us to answer these questions using the power of myth. Mythology contains the archetypes that allow us to tap into the primal power of play. As Joseph Campbell once theorized, human beings are special, not because of our tools, but because of our imaginations. He believed that our naked faces, read non-hairy mammal faces, gave us the power like never before to communicate and understand a wide range of emotions and ideas. Why are we born as such helpless little babies? Campbell theorized that this all goes back to the malleability of the brain. The less developed a brain at birth, the more capability a species has to respond and make changes based on their environment. Although science still, hold up. This is the challenge. I'm reading, I'm talking, I'm doing too many things at once. Although science still has a ways to go to verify the following claim, Campbell went one step further, because really, why not? And postulated that all Earth creatures are born with presets or schemas that help them understand and respond to their environment. There's actually scientific evidence for this. But the next bit is where things get a bit debatable. Campbell took Jung's idea about the collective unconscious and thought, what if every creature had access to the collective unconscious, and some species are just more separate from it than others? Does that sound weird? Well, welcome to existential mythology, friends. It's measured in Jeremy Bearimy. So to wrap up, humans are special because we are emotionally sensitive beings who have access to both the collective unconscious that might contain all the knowledge of Earth and the ability via personal consciousness and unconsciousness to create new knowledge and new actions. But how do we create this newness? Play. If you thought play was just for kids and not really that important, and I don't think that you believe that because you're at a convention, well, your naked face would disagree. The idea that play is only for children is a Westworld construct. You'll learn about those in the book. That we heartily encourage you to question. We invite you to look around at all the ways that you already play and how that play makes your world an even better place. We would imagine, friend, that you actually engage in a lot of play if you've picked up this book. But you might be new to the particular play of fan fiction. Just need a sip of water. Anyone have a thought, question, or feeling while I have a sip of water? You're all just here to chill and listen. I love it. Fanfic, literally what it says. Fan fiction is founded on the practice of rejecting those narratives or stories that are out of character for fandom favorites and creating stories that are more truly resonant. Fan fiction in daily life allows fans to break out of the stories that no longer serve them and create those that empower them. Star Trek is considered the birth fandom of fanfic. Back when the Enterprise was first flying, a group of mostly women, thinkers, began to concoct their own stories about their beloved crew. And Gene Roddenberry was freaking into it. Footnote, so maybe he just turned a blind eye, but in our headcanon, he was into it. Sherlock Holmes also has an incredibly long fanfic history. Sir Arthur was pretty chill about this as well. The thing is, creators didn't get super elitist about owning characters until much later. Just try to slip in some Armand and Louis fanfic and Anne Rice, oh, rip, Anne Rice, will have you sent to a metaphorical dungeon. Luckily, fan fiction is now a beloved outlet for fans, and there are safe spaces for writing, sharing, and offering feedback on each other's fic. Such as Archive of Our Own, or AO3, there's fanfic for everything. Do you ship Neil Armstrong with Elon Musk? There's a fanfic for that. Seriously, we looked that up before we put it in the book. Of course, what we just described is real person fic, or RPF, which is considered taboo in some circles. We don't judge. We actually think that RPF is great because that's sort of the basis of therapeutic fan fiction. You are the real person who you are ficking. This is your life, and you get to decide when the writers are going in the wrong direction and start to course correct. Just like Anne Rice, there might be people in your life who don't like the new direction where you're taking your character, and that's okay. It isn't their story, it's yours. So you can thank Anne for her contribution to your story thus far and get down to the business of uniting Louis and Armand. Or if you're thinking about ficking your real life, you might thank your dear Aunt Anne, or your Aunt JK for that matter, for her contribution in raising you, while compassionately letting her know that you are passing back all that anti-queer and anti-trans rhetoric she spent... Hold, please. You are passing back all that anti-queer and anti-trans rhetoric she spoon-fed you with the cream corn. Thank you very much. Step by step, day by day. So far in this book, we have explored different aspects of the therapeutic fanfiction model. The hero's journey, fandom attachments, the Westworld construct, externalization, personification, resilience, and post-traumatic growth. Those are all things you can look forward to if you get this book. In upcoming chapters, we'll explore even more tools to add to your therapeutic fan fiction toolkit. Each question that you've asked yourself and asked about the world will help you with rewriting the story of your life. But how do you start the rewrite process? It's like they said on ABC's TGIF lineup, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step, or something like that. The most important step of therapeutic fan fiction is best symbolized by the archetype of the fellowship. Yes, that fellowship. We're talking Lord of the Rings, Gandalf, Frodo, Sam, Merry, Pippin, Aragorn, Gimli, Legolas, and Boromir. Sigh, yes, even you, Boromir. Because everyone deserves the chance for love and redemption. This technique is a riff on a narrative therapy technique called remembering. It's not remembering, it's remembering. It invites you to take stock of the people in your life and consider whom you experience as supportive and whom you experience as, well, unhelpful. Then you get to decide who gets invited inside your house and who needs to stay on the porch. Don't worry, this will make more sense in Chapter 7, when we discuss rules, roles, and boundaries. Readers, join us, the writers, on an adventure to find our fellowship. We are creating the members who will help us during a particular quest, understanding that we can remember at any time as the quest needs arise. Whereas White and Epstein, those are the narrative therapy guys, envision remembering as a stage that happens roughly midway through the therapeutic process and means changing your lineup of supportive friends and community. The fellowship step happens first and is more focused on rallying your fandom attachments. You can certainly include IRL folks in your fellowship, be they currently with you on this mortal plane, or may they be dead. Anne Rice could be in your fellowship. The key is to mentally gather and then possibly physically write down or type down a list of fandom attachments, IRL attachments, and beloved fandom tools. You could also totally make a fellowship vision board. We're really looking forward to the day that people start tagging us on social media with their fandom vision boards, but it is not this day. The guiding principle for who and what you choose are those characters, attributes, and tools that are in alignment with your personal goals and values. We chose the fellowship in this example because it embodies a group of friends embarking on a perilous quest, which is how we envision ourselves with you, reader. This fandom archetype aligns with our value of friendship and our goal to make the journey together. Now, we need to know what this quest is about. We have our mission statement, rewrite your story. But to do that, we need to figure out the challenges that you and your fellowship are up against. Think back to Chapter 3. You can't. Imagine you read Chapter 3. Conjure forth the image of a depression demogorgon and an anxiety gremlin. Those are things you could learn about in Chapter 3. Terrifying, aren't they? But be not afraid. Remember that you have an entire list or vision board of the fandom fellowship here to help you on this quest. Maybe your challenges are best exemplified as no face, also known as social anxiety. Perhaps your current struggle is with your family of origin. More of this on Chapters 7 and 8. Make a list, or if you want, a shadow vision board of these challenges. Set your lists or vision boards up side by side and try to match up the dyadic pairs. You can tell Spock was real into this. Right? She was like, yes, we're going to do stuff, and then we're going to set them up next to each other and do dyadic pairs. What do we mean by that? Well, Campbell and Jung had this idea that all mythic constructs came in pairs. Harry and Voldemort, Link and Shadow Link, Luke and Darth Vader, Black Panther and Killmonger in the movies, Storm and Callisto, Buffy and Faith. Matching up your pairs will help you to map out the fandom attachments or tools that will help you on different parts of your journey. Let's say that you have the Scooby Gang from Buffy the Vampire Slayer on your vision board. This is not an endorsement of Joss Whedon. And you have anxiety gremlins on your shadow board. The gremlins get the most activated for you around interactions with your overbearing boss. Before you match up, consider what it is about your boss that has the gremlins so activated. Is there an internal narrative you believe about yourself that your boss reinforces? Perhaps your boss confirms your strongly held belief that you are not good enough. How does this narrative serve you? Does it in fact harm you? Then it might be time for the power of fan fiction to change this story. You might match Buffy up with your boss who intimidates you because you believe that you are a meek human, but you wish that you had more confidence. Buffy has a snarky confidence that feels like just the light you need against the shadow of your boss, whom you find humorless and stern. Or you might pair Willow with the gremlin that represents your relationship with a loved one, because you've seen how she was able to work through many different difficult relationships with her own friends. If you don't find a match between the two boards or lists, take a moment and brainstorm a few more helpers for your fellowship. There are no rules for how many folks you can have. It's infinite. The most important thing is that your fellowship makes sense to you. Once you've identified the dyads, you will be able to call upon your fandom attachment whenever you need them. So if your boss is being especially stern, you might notice that your internal monologue begins again about how you just aren't very good at anything. Would Buffy stand for someone saying that to you? No, she wouldn't. Buffy would do anything to protect her friends. So take a moment to look inside and check in with your inner Buffy. Does your inner Buffy share a quip? Suggest that you go on patrol? Just take a walk. Does she want you to slay the beast who is hurting you? That's slay with words, not stakes. Your inner Buffy might make one or all of these suggestions, and then it's up to you to decide what to do. Once you get this feedback, you can consider how you want to further channel Buffy when you respond to that email your boss sent you. The more you channel Buffy, the more you get to experience other parts of yourself. Over time, you may find that the story you had of yourself as a meek person who isn't great with quips or comebacks starts to shift. Maybe you aren't that shy kid in the corner from third grade anymore. Once you start to notice these thoughts, you're ready for the final boss battle, rewriting part of the story of you. This may take you to some challenging places, including encounters with past and present versions of you. Think Link battling Shadow Link, or Buffy battling the first Slayer, or Storm battling her claustrophobia, as well as encounters with friends, family, and community. In the same way that you can begin to offer compassion to yourself when you think of your depression as an adorable cat, I promise it'll make sense if you read the whole book, so too can you begin to challenge the narrative in all aspects of your life through your interaction with your fandom attachments. Another beverage break. Anyone have thoughts, questions, feelings at this point? No? That's what therapists do. We check in a lot. Meaning making. The seeds of therapeutic fan fiction have been around for a long time. in part because creative storytelling is how human beings cope with tragedy. As we discussed in Chapter 1, play and storytelling go hand in hand. And we aren't just talking about video games or tabletop gaming here. We're talking about play that stretches back through the ages. If you're a literary nerd, or just a fan of the PBS show Wishbone, you've probably heard of the Bronte sisters. Emily, Charlotte, and Anne grew up to write some of the greatest works of 19th century English language literature: Wuthering Heights, Jane Eyre, and The Tenant of Wildfell Hall, being the most infamous. But before they could write these novels, they had to survive their hellacious childhood. Born to a tempestuous clergyman, the sisters lost their mother when Anne was only a year old, and in rapid succession lost both of their elder parentified sisters, while all three were still under the age of 10. Together with their brother Branwell, who would go on to follow in their father's footsteps in more ways than one, the children created a make-believe community called Angria for Branwell's 12 toy soldiers. I'm sure somewhere Spock is cringing at my pronunciation. She's the lit nerd. They wrote novels, newspapers, magazines, and poetry, and designed an elaborate history for their make-believe world. If this sounds an awful lot like play therapy, that's because it is. Or rather, it was as close as 4 children with no in-home therapists could get to play therapy. And as adults, minus Branwell, who never quite got his poetry off the ground, they continued writing themselves into more pleasant environs, writing the independent lives largely denied them by 19th century rural Britain. What the Bronte sisters were doing, and what we all do when we engage in any kind of fanfic activity, was making meaning. Humans are meaning-making creatures who are constantly in search of it. A human can survive almost any how for a why. Within fandom, meaning abounds. Stories allow fans to make sense of the world around them and to create meaning within both the world of fandom and the world of daily life. One of the great scholars in meaning-making was Viktor Frankl, a psychiatrist who created a style of therapy called logotherapy that focused solely on man's search for meaning, also the name of his most famous book. His book tells of Frankl's time in Auschwitz and how he came to find meaning under even the most terrible circumstances. One of the pillars of Frankl's work centers around the power of choice. It is perhaps no surprise that Frankl perfected this theory when he was in the camps. While imprisoned, he had lost most of the personal control he once had over his life. Part of how he survived the camps was to retreat back to a place of emotional control. Though he could neither control the events around him, nor the actions taken against him, nor even the emotions these situations evoked, he could choose how to respond. This realization is the foundation of logotherapy, the therapeutic modality he had begun to develop prior to being rounded up and imprisoned, but later honed in the camps. This revelation and his desire to share it with the world was Frankl's boon or gift from the underworld that he kept safe to bring back from the abyss and share with his community. Fandom is much more than meets the eye. Insert Transformer joke. Our fandom attachments allow us to find meaning in our lives and to make sense of our world and the people around us. Consider all the stories that have helped you through difficult times, and the stories that have allowed all of us to bear witness to other people's journeys. Maus, M-A-U-S, is a beautiful and heartbreaking example of a story of a desperate journey into the camp at Auschwitz and the author's experience interviewing his father to write this work of art. Writing the story of his father's trauma allowed Art Spiegelman to understand his father, and by so doing, make sense of his own experience of transgenerational trauma. We get into that in here. From there, Art was able to decide what family lessons or tools he wanted to keep and what tools he wanted to pass back. By writing Mouse, Art literally fanficked his own life, similar to the Bronte sisters, and completed his own meaning-making journey. Fandom fosters meaning and gives fans a language around life's purpose. As you create your vision or shadow boards, you can reflect on the fandom characters who help you make sense of your life when things are hard. Those characters who offer a thoughtful answer to all of your questions. For us, specifically, this is a story about me. You get to know that. Other people who buy the book don't know which one of us it is. I looked up, that was dangerous. For us, one of these characters will always be Special Agent Dale Cooper from Twin Peaks. Coop is always ready and waiting to give you a thumbs up, a hearty hug, or a handshake, and of course, his own special wisdom around the importance of daily gifts. So what would Coop suggest as you're going through a hard time? A cup of coffee and a delicious piece of cherry pie? Or maybe it simply sparks meaning to spend time with him virtually in Twin Peaks via rewatching seasons 1 and or 2. If you love season 3, no shade. It just didn't do it for me. Using the language from your fandom can help to make sense of what's happening in your life and can let others know what's going on with you too. Turning to a specific fandom character helps you access and activate the character's role in your life as a guide. Guides, or helpers, support us in our meaning-making or hero's journey. Pause for a moment. Anyone need anything? You're all heroes. I appreciate you coming to hang out with me. There's nothing sadder than doing a reading and no one shows up. True story. I did a reading, this was years ago for another book, and nobody showed up, and so I was just about getting ready to leave, and then someone came in, and I was like, oh my goodness, this is so exciting, and he was like, I was looking for this other room. Somehow worse. Totem. Our fandom attachments can make for great creative opportunities beyond creating traditional therapeutic fan fictions. You might also feel drawn to create fan art or crafts inspired by your heroes. The act of creating in any form allows your brain to experience play and to continue to feel securely connected. It can also be a great opportunity to craft your own personal grounding object or totem. Totems are objects of meaning, history, and magic. Although totems in mainstream media tend to be associated with non-white cultures, totems have been a part of the human species since ancient times. However, as white folks, i.e., the ruling class of Western European regions, sought to distance themselves from their more primitive beginnings, they began to speak of their meaningful items as heirlooms. The word totem began to take on a negative or pejorative meaning. But is a family heirloom china set really more advanced than a Ghanaian mask passed down generationally? Obviously not. For an example of such a totem in fandom, we need look no further than T'Challa, also known as Black Panther, and his family ring. This ancestral heirloom reminds T'Challa of his commitment to his family and his loyalty to his community. It grounds him in his role as Black Panther, protector of the realm. Njadaka, aka Eric Stevens, aka Killmonger, as a member of the Wakandan royal family, also has a ring, inherited from his father. This, coupled with the mask he steals from a London museum, grounds him in his purpose to reconnect with and rejoin the country, Wakanda, and to take back the birthright that he feels was unfairly denied him. In therapeutic fan fiction, you can find an object that evokes meaning for you, or you can make it. Crafting your own totem can be both a centering mindfulness practice or a way for you to connect more deeply with the stories and characters that resonate for you. Creating sculpture or a graphic representation of a character with whom you resonate, beading a mala bracelet using fandom inspiration, or knitting or crocheting a plush friend are all ways you can create your totem. May your soul re-enter your body. If you're a Starfleet engineer, perhaps you want to build your own potato clock to remind you to stay grounded like a potato. If binary is more your thing, perhaps you could build a mindfulness app. Or you could use instruments or computers to create anything from sweet synth beats to slow guitar jams. Totems can be found or bought from fellow fandom lovers. When we visited Iceland, again, this is a story of mine, we took a rock from a Game of Thrones filming site, making it our totem. Since the ancients, bread has symbolized the energy to continue on one's quest. We hope that as we bid adieu to this chapter, you are taking with you more therapeutic fan fiction skills and knowledge. Even though the first few chapters were like a trail of breadcrumbs, we hope that now you have more than a little food for thought. Just pausing, because you're about to get a fan fiction case study, which means my writing partner and I, for each chapter, we included a yoga sequence. Some of you might know I'm a yoga teacher, or a meditation, as well as our fanfic of what it would be like to work with some of our favorite characters. This one will be about Link from Legend of Zelda. And we just gave him the magical power to speak, because that's the power of fanfic. You can just decide that a character that's never spoken now speaks. One sec. Also, if you're enjoying my voice, I did record the audiobook, so you can have these dulcet Muppet-like tones in your ears for 10 hours, along with my co-author. We read it back and forth. Fanfic case study, Legend of Zelda, Goodbye Isn't the End. Having just closed out our trauma work with the Great Deku Tree, we were eagerly anticipating the weekend and our booking at the famous Hyrule Bed and Breakfast, run by the always hospitable Mr. and Mr. Darmani of the Goron community. We glance down at our respective watches just as we hear a soft tinkling of bells and a voice reminiscent of Fran Drescher. We look up to see fluttering wings and bright sparkling lights. Hello! Is that you, Navi? We ask. You haven't been seen since the opener to Majora's Mask. Navi shakes her wings in a frustrated fashion, filling our treehouse office with a cacophony of bells. Hey, listen! This isn't about me. It's about my friend, Link. He's lost and alone and in need of some guidance. Before we can gently suggest that this seems more like her department, Navi flies up and out the window. With a final jostling of bells, she's gone. With that, we are on our way again, but are once more interrupted, this time by a loud hup. We decide that we aren't going to be on time for the bed and breakfast and send a quick apology text. Within moments, a small green-clad figure of questionable age hops into our treeway. Hi, I'm Link. I can talk now. Well, he can talk now. He is still new to it. Hello, Link. A friend of yours was just here and seemed worried about you. Would you like to come in? Link looks up into our faces with tears in his eyes. I have friends. I don't remember them. I'm not sure if I remember who I am. He wanders over to a soft chair that looks vaguely like moss. May I sit? Please. We motion for him to sit and offer him some tea, which he happily accepts. So, Link, tell us more about what's going on, as much as you can remember. Link takes a deep breath. Well, a while ago, I woke up in a big cavern with all these glowing blue lights, and I heard this strange, ethereal voice. But then I felt annoyed, then excited, then annoyed again. I found my big blue iPhone and sat off out of the cavern, where I was immediately attacked by a large orange monster. I don't know how, but I remembered how to fight and vanquish them using a branch I foraged for in some bushes next to the cavern, which might actually have been a temple. He pauses to take a sip of tea. This is really good. What did you make it with? It's oolong. It comes in a packet. Wow, I think I have to make all my food from scratch. That sounds really hard. Both the food thing and all the other stuff, too. It sounds like for all intents and purposes, you've been fighting for as long as you can remember. That would be very hard. How can we best support you through this, Link? Link furrows his brow. I'm not sure I know what you're asking. All of my memories are jumbled around. The more I try to make sense of them, the more confused I get. Link pauses to study the oolong sloshing around his cup. This might sound weird, but I think I've been a bunch of Links in a lot of different places. Some of those places were definitely Hyrule, but some of them definitely were not. We look at him with compassionate faces. That doesn't sound weird at all, Link. Actually, all of us are many people at once. Link looks a bit confused. Does that sound weird? Maybe, but also it makes sense. Can you explain it more? You bet. So there's this idea in therapy that our minds aren't unitary, meaning that they aren't just one thing, but are in fact many things. We have lots of different parts of ourselves. Some parts want different things than others, but they all want what's best for the person. But what if I was different Links in different times, or in different places? I think I was. I have memories of being much smaller than I am now, and I helped a princess, and I played an instrument kind of like a flute, but it wasn't a flute. And then I think I was bigger, but still playing the not flute. I met all kinds of beings, Gorons, Kokiri, Zoras, but then it gets jumbled again because the next thing I know I'm small again, and I'm sad, and my best friend is gone, and I'm in this weird city whose name seems like time, but isn't. And then there's a twilight place where I'm bigger again, but also sometimes a wolf. The worst part is I don't remember my friends, and I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing here. In all those other times and places, I get the feeling I had a purpose, but I can't remember that either. Link shakes his mug in frustration, scattering oolong onto the woven mat that doubles as a carpet. Wow, that's a lot. No wonder you feel confused and frustrated. It sounds like there are lots of different memories or parts that are trying to get your attention. Could we pause for a moment and just take a breath? Link looks down at the mat. He says softly, I'm sorry about your carpet. You know what? We wanted to get a new one anyway. Link looks up and smiles. Really? So by spilling the tea, I kind of helped you then. You did. It seems like helping is important to all iterations of you. Link takes a deep breath and stares out the window. We wait for a few moments and then offer, you can exhale now. Oh, right. Slowly, Link breathes in and out. I think so. Yes, I think helping has always been part of what I do. Does that make sense? It does. And it also explains why these memories are so loud for you. When our parts are trying to tell us something important, they keep getting louder and louder until we're open to listening to what they have to say. It sounds like your parts are trying to tell you what's important to you and why. Link chuckles. I used to know someone who'd get louder and louder to get my attention. You did? Do you remember who that was? Link closes his eyes. Navi. I think her name was Navi, and she meant everything to my destiny. But now she's gone. Link opens his eyes as 2 large tears fall onto his green tunic. We pause for a moment to allow Link to just be with his feelings around this realization. After a few breaths, we offer, Link, just because someone isn't with us physically doesn't mean that they are gone. What would Navi say if she were here right now? Hey, listen! In a really screechy voice. She was always telling me things I already knew or was already paying attention to. But, it was nice to have her there to name them. She sounds like a really good friend. And even if she can't be with you, she can still help you. You can still call upon her whenever you need her to tell you, hey, listen, inside your own mind. You are attached to her, and that means that she can be your helper wherever and whenever you need her. So she can still help me figure out what I'm doing here? She absolutely can. How about we test that out? Can you take another breath and just turn inward, whatever that means to you? Maybe close your eyes and just ask Navi to come forward in your mind. Do you see her? Link's eyes are closed so tight that his face is turning red. Yes, I do see her. She's a fairy and she sounds like bells when she moves. Great. Now this might sound a little weird, but can you ask the Navi in your mind if she'll talk to us for a bit? Link nods. Okay, thank her for being willing to help us out. Now ask if there's something that she wants you to know. She says she wants me to save Hyrule. No, wait, she's not saying that. That's what my old memories say. She says she wants me to make new friends. She says it might be hard at first, but that I can try. I'm better at it than I think. Link bows his head and says softly, "Thanks, Navi." That was wonderful, Link. Ask the Navi in your mind if she'd also like to stay with you as you start to make new friends, or if she'd like to stay somewhere else where you can find her when you need her. She says she wants to stay in the fairy fountain near Goron Pass. She says it's where she was born, and it has always been her favorite. I know the way there, so I'll always be able to go back and visit when I need to. She says I can always visit. That's beautiful. Before we say goodbye to her, is there anything else that you'd like to tell the Navi in your mind? I'm sorry for all those times I yelled at you. You were only trying to help. It's just sometimes it's hard to fight boss battles and talk to your friend in a normal speaking voice. That's not an excuse, just context. That's very kind of you. How does she respond? She says thank you. She appreciates hearing that. Does it feel okay to the both of you to say goodbye for now? Link takes a deep, shuddering breath. I think so. She'll be happy at the fairy fountain. I wish we'd had more time together, but I probably always would have wanted more time. I love you, Navi. That's right. You would always want more time. Take a moment and say goodbye, and take the Navi in your mind to the fairy fountain. We can wait. Just let us know when you're back. We sit quietly and watch as Link takes several deep breaths, opening and closing his hands. After what feels like both a long and a short time, he opens his eyes and looks around the room. He blinks. Hey, I feel better. I actually feel better. How did you do that? Are you a wizard? No, we're not wizards. But we have some pretty great wizards in our own minds who help us along the way, too. We look at one another and smile. Would you like another cup of tea? Yeah, Link says. I would like that. And then there's a yoga sequence that I won't be doing. But that ends chapter 5. Thank you all for coming to hang out. And I'm happy to answer any questions, thoughts, or feelings that you might have. And I can come out from behind this thing so it seems less like I'm lecturing at you. Haha, hi.
Oh, no, I was just passing by to sit over here. No.
Another painful memory plants itself in my mind. No, go ahead.
I think with what some of what you've read that really stuck with me is the whole concept of totems, especially now. I mean, seeing your arm, and then I've got my tattoos.
Yep, we have similar totems.
Yeah, so that's kind of the thing, and even students asking me certain things. I mean, some very obvious, like this one I had recently because of having lost my granddaughter, and this one, of course, Doctor Who. So this is memory.
Yep.
You know, and hopefully one day I don't lose my memory as I'm getting older, but there have been signs, who knows. But this helps me to remember, and even at certain times, I can look at it and just remember, you know, the blessings that I did have for the short time she was here. Yeah. And then this, of course, with Doctor Who, it's been such a connection for me since my childhood. You know, we're talking well over 40 years that I have been a huge fan for Doctor Who. Yeah. And trying to explain that to students, going, well, why do you have tattoos, the few that do? And some just, well, it's just cool, you know, but then you get some that, well, it's not just cool, it really does have meaning. So in a way, I've told them that this helps me get through things. This right here, my son also has one to commemorate his daughter, that it helps us heal. I guess is the best way to put it, which is going to take a very, very long time. Yeah. And then the same with Doctor Who. It's just that, again, this has always been, I don't know if you want to call it a safe place, but it's always been something that I can turn to when, not just for enjoyment on its own, but when I've had certain moods. If I'm a bit down, that's something I'll just pop in to watch and escape into a little bit. But it then helps me connect with the reminder of, like, fandom. I've made such great friendships in fandom where we've helped support each other, not even just through the TV show itself, but the TV show helped us connect. Yeah. And now I've got people I have yet to meet physically that I've known for a few years that live overseas in England that I already have plans to meet with this summer. And even with that, when we went through the things with my granddaughter and her illness, they were right there. And it seemed very strange that some people were going, but they don't know you. How do you, I go, they don't know me, but at the same time, they've reached out. How are you doing? What can I do for you? I've been through something similar. And actually, we're so supportive. And I would have never met these people without this fandom of Doctor Who. So again, more reason why I feel I needed this tattoo to help me in reminding me that besides my family and friends here that I see, I've got a family out there in a sense that have also been very, very supportive because of this show.
Yeah. Oh, that's so
So-
beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. Yes, I also wear many of my totems. This keeps going. There is a TARDIS back here. So don't worry if anyone was worried. Yeah, thank you so much. Oh, it's beautiful. Other thoughts, questions, feelings? I'm a therapist. I'm not your therapist. Don't worry. I'm not going to try to therapize you.
Just a question, why Legends of Zelda?
Ah, okay. So the reason Zelda is in the book, and it's just one of the stories we picked. I know some people came in late, so just in case you didn't hear before, I am the captain of the Starship Therapise, and then my creative partner is Spock, the first officer, and she's a big gamer. And so Legend of Zelda has been really meaningful to her. And she wanted to make sure that Link was included because he's been a very important fandom attachment for her. There's lots of messages in that story about trauma and how trauma can be, trauma never feels good, but that we can grow from trauma. There's this idea in psychology of, I'm sure folks have heard of post-traumatic stress disorder, but there's also this idea of post-traumatic growth, that if we have certain protective factors in place, that we can really grow from our experience of trauma. And Larissa is my co-author. She really felt that Link exemplified post-traumatic growth and wanted to be sure that he was in there. So that's how Link got in there. I'm not a gamer, much to her chagrin. I dabble, but the video game world really helps her make sense of things, which is fun because we have, we overlap in some fandoms, but we also have some differences. So there are so many fandoms in that book. Like if you can open that and not find something that resonates with you, then that book's probably not for you, because there's so many fandoms in there. From the nerdy to, we got Golden Girls. You heard about, What's the Story, Wishbone. There's a Jack Russell Terrier in there. I mean, thanks for the question, I appreciate it. Any others? Are we streaming? Are there people at home?
There are a few people watching, but no questions.
Okay.
In the chat.
Okay, just wanted to check. I don't want to forget you friends at home.
There is a comment.
Mm-hmm.
You have a very interesting approach to therapy.
Oh, thank you. I do, and I'm really trying to get other therapists on board. And believe it or not, there's a whole community of us who think similarly, and we're all doing different stuff. There's therapists that are using therapeutic Dungeons and Dragons. There are therapists that are doing therapeutic video gaming. There's lots of us doing, pulling from TV and movies, comics. So it's I don't want to say I was at the forefront of it, because there's this tiny part of me that's really modest, but I can't pretend that I wasn't. And so it's a really exciting time to be a therapist and see other people kind of starting to come in. And every time I do a presentation, there's inevitably someone who is either connected to therapy in some way, or they themselves are a therapist, and they'll come up and be like, how do I learn how to do this, either as a therapist or how do I get my therapist to learn how to do this? And I'm like, well, geek culture, nerd culture, lit culture, whatever you want to call it, it's a community, which means it's a group and it's a lowercase c culture. So I believe that we need cultural competence in working with folks who make meaning out of stories. And mainstream therapy is starting to catch on. I think that was one of the positive things. There was nothing positive about the pandemic, But I think it was something positive about us slowing down and having to be home more, was that engaging with stories stopped being like, well, that's just, a dumb thing that you do. That's just a distraction. It's like, well, it was our job to stay home and watch Tiger King. You gonna tell me I can't talk to my friends about Tiger King? It's the only thing I'm doing right now. And so some of the stigma has started to downshift, which I think is amazing, because mainstream therapists are starting to go, oh, okay. So this isn't just during the pandemic, which, like, spoilers, we're still in. But like, maybe people make meaning out of stories all the time. Like, yeah. There's a whole bunch of us. And even more now that, some comic stories have gone mainstream, right? Like, lots of people could use a metaphor of Thor and Mjolnir. Like, that's not so niche anymore. All right, we've got just about a minute if anybody wanted to sneak anything in before the end. Just like a real therapy session. I'm literally about to close out the therapy session, and then the person says, by the way, I'm having an affair, and I don't know what to do about it. I'm like, okay, we've got 1 minute and 26 seconds.
Hey, Justine.
Yeah.
By the way, I'm really glad you're here and you're part of our console room community.
Aww.
Thank you.
Aw, thank you. That was very sweet. I appreciate it. Since we do have a single minute, I just want to show you the back of my shirt. This is my favorite 1-star review of the book. Someone thought that this was a cacophony of witchcraft, scapegoating, and what's the last one? Identity politics. So I thought it was enough of a ringing endorsement that I put it on a shirt. I will be on a panel. I think my next panel is talking about musical episodes, and then I will be signing books at 7 o'clock just out in this little lobby area. I am happy to talk. If you are someone who didn't want to get up and speak in front of folks, I totally get that. But if you want to come say, hey, happy to do that. If you have a book, I'm happy to sign it. And if you don't have a book and you want one, I've got them. So you can get one and get my Jane Hancock on it. So thank you so much for hanging out. I really appreciate it. Live long and prosper, friends.